Let us pray. We say thank you for all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself and for the measure of health. And help us, Lord, to fulfill our callings for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honour of bearing appropriate responsibility. Thanks as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. And thank you for being there for us and to guide us on our way. In the scriptures you've said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities. And since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice, we pray for our mayor, for the various levels of town officials, and for this council as we gather here tonight. Tonight we ask that you would graciously grant us wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times. And especially this evening, we ask that you would be with us as we vote for the local plan, that we might hold the tensions between each other and vote for what is good and right. We pray for a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people in Maidstone, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony, even when there is honest disagreement, and that we might find personal peace in our lives and joy in the tasks that lie ahead, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, members. Thank you. These proceedings will be recorded by the Council, but will anybody else be recording or filming them? I ask so that people at this meeting will be minded if this is going to be happening. Right. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2. I've received apologies for absence from Councillors Garland, Harwood and Springate. Sorry.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. Louise, Councillor Bryce is due to come, but I think she's just got stuck in traffic at the moment. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Patrick Garden. Okay.
I do apologise. It's Patrick. I think Councillor Garden is due as well, I believe. He's apologised. I'm sorry, I'm behind the times.
Yeah, my
brain's still in Singapore.
My understanding is not coming. Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda item 3. Are there any applications for dispensation? Agenda item 4. Are there any disclosures for disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests by members? No, thank you. Members will have received a briefing note from the head of legal partnership containing guidance on predetermination. Are there any disclosures by officers?
No, Mr Mayor.
No. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Very good.
Can you ask them who hasn't been lobbied? It'd be easier.
Right, to make life just a bit easier for us, who hasn't been lobbied? It's okay. Thank you, members. Is it agreed that items on the agenda are taken in public as proposed? Thank you. Agenda item 7 are the minutes of the meeting of the Borough Council held on the 19th of July 2017, agreed as a correct record. Thank you, members. Mayor's announcements. You may recall at the last meeting I mentioned that Mike Fitzgerald has received the MBE, of which I do believe he collects on Tuesday. And that's all I'd say, Mike, is don't be late, because I understand the lady doesn't wait. But just in recognition of all the great work you've done and a lot of work that people never know what goes on behind the scenes you've done over the years, it is very, very much appreciated. It is by myself. I've met you on quite a few occasions now, either as Deputy Mayor or as Mayor, and you always seem to be there, foraging away, etc. And without people like yourself, where would we be? Just as a very small recognition of what you've done on behalf of the council members here, it gives me great pleasure to have a little plaque for you. And yeah.
Everyone taking the picture?
If you can pass it over.
Is that for him as well?
Yeah. I can't reach.
Mr. Mayor. Picture.
Right, I've now got to find where I was or where I wasn't. Mayor's announcements. Thanks, Mike. enjoy your time. As I said, Mike's going up to get his MB on Tuesday, so all the very best. Just a quick update of what I've been doing over the last few months, etc. To date, we've completed almost 150 engagements. You can most likely talk about every engagement you went to. And I think, as Mike has alluded to, charities, etc., they really do touch the heart at times. And where would we be without volunteers and people like Mike and our members here? One of them which I did attend was the Samaritans. And we all know the Samaritans and the great work they do. But one of the areas they're now going into is schools. There is a big problem in schools. And they've started a scheme which is called Step by Step. This is aimed at school children who are experiencing problems and, as you're most likely minded, social media and the expectations of results, etc., play pretty heavy on children these days. I was talking to a number of headmasters and governors on this, and I was absolutely a bit shocked when they actually said that within the school it is their biggest problem. Social media, expectations of parents and so forth. And I said, you know, what's the numbers? And they said 1 in 5 of our students are affected, and it's getting worse. So the Samaritans have produced a brochure which is called Step by Step. If members would like one, you can either contact me and I'll arrange for it for you, or you can get onto the Samaritans. But it is it's something which is now coming very much to the fore relating to schools. And I talked to my grandchildren on this. It is a big, big problem. So if there's anything we can do along that line, and being minded of what is available through the Samaritans. And the interesting thing, when I spoke to the headmasters and the governors, and I actually said, when you get a problem like this, where do you take it? And it's just a blank wall. We don't know where to take it. That's what I'm saying now. There is an avenue open, which is through the Samaritans. So if you need any more information, just contact me, and I'm quite happy. Just give you a quick resume of where I'm with my 3 projects for my charities. Kent Lung Awareness, of which young Derek over there, young Derek Butler, and I have been working on. It is basically to refurbish a garden up at Maidstone Hospital alongside the cancer ward. To date, we've got landscape gardeners, surveyors, ground workers, people do the planting, etc., are working on this. And it is absolutely great that this is all being done at no cost. So that saves a lot of money out of my budget and enables us to do even more. We're also hoping to do another garden in the children's area because that is absolutely dilapidated as well. So that's where we're going on that. And Mid-Kent College, they're on board. There's an enormous great wall. It must be about 5, 6, 7 metres square, and it's just a blank canvas. And what they're going to be doing is painting a mural on it for us. They're now working on the scheme, and one would hope that talking to them come February time, we'll have a lot of this work already done. But it will actually help not only the lung awareness ward, but actually as you come into the hospital as well, it'll give it a far better feel. Maidstone Sea Cadets, another one of my charities. We've had a bit of luck here. We've managed to locate 2 pontoons at Bewley. When I was opening the East Farley locks, I come across the people from Macleys. Macleys are a large building people. They work on sea defences, and I just asked them if they'd got any spare pontoons. And as always happens, yes, what do you want? I said, there's no money in it for you. He said, we don't want money. I just told them we're doing it for the Sea Cadets. David and I went down to Bewley about a week ago now. Got in a little boat, paddled down the Solent there, stood on these pontoons. It's got to go back here now, which we hope that Macleys are going to do for us. So that will enable us to complete this project. The civils aren't too bad. And what I'm really looking to do is get this project, which has been an aspiration for the Sea Cadets now for 30 years, I think it is, David. You know, they work fast, don't they, these boys? So I'm hoping to get that completed in April, May this year. Blackthorn Trust is the third of my charities. We've had this all resurveyed. We know what the costs are. The big problem is going to be is plugging the gap of the funding. So that's where we're at relating to that. Just to conclude, I've got a dinner auction at the Great Danes Hotel on November the 25th. We've got some fantastic auction items. We've got diamond earrings, £750 with a certificate. A Mercedes for a weekend, a trip to Bentley's. We've got a lot going, trips up the river, so and balloon trips and so forth. So there's that, which I trust that people will support us. Also, what I'm looking to do, that the church down the road here has been a big plus, you know, to Maidstone, and we just really do take it for granted at times. What I've arranged, we're going to have 2 concerts at All Saints Church next year, April 27, May 13. The first one is with the Invicta Jazz Orchestra, Maidstone Singers and a few other bodies. All the money from that will go to the church fund. The second one, which we're going to call To Raise the Roof, will get as many of the local choirs as we possibly can in there. I say that's on May the April 27th, and the takings from that will be shared between my charities and the church. So that's some of the things we've been doing, and we'll give you an update later on where we're going. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Councillor Bryce is asking to come in.
Come in, Councillor Bryce. You're more than welcome. All settled, are we? Thank you. Good. What I'd like to do is just change the order of the agenda slightly. That after item 11, I'd like to bring in items 17 and 16. That's basically because we don't want our friends in the general public over there just sitting around listening to us. So that will possibly make life a bit easier for them. Right. Agenda item 9. There are no petitions this evening. Agenda item 10. Questions and answer session for members of the public. I've received notification that Councillor Geraldine Brown, Chairman of Maidstone Calc and Yorkshire Parish Council, wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transport Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, members. Councillor Burton, do you accept that if DCLG's current consultation proposals are subsequently adopted, our borough will be expected to take about 7,000 more homes than the 17,660 in the local plan to be adopted this evening?
Councillor Burton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In short, yes. If the government's proposed methodology is confirmed, the annual housing requirement would increase from 883 to 1,236 dwellings per year, amounting to an additional 7,060 dwellings over a 20-year period compared with the local plan. I think it's very important to note that if we adopt a local plan, the annual requirement will be fixed at 883 dwellings per year until the plan is reviewed.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Brown, do you wish to answer? Oh, sorry about that. Group leaders, would you like to respond? Councillor Harper, thank you.
Yes, I think Councillor Burton's correct in terms of the numbers, but I think you know, the need for additional housing in the country, I think, is recognised by most people. The homelessness and the problems of the young trying to get on the housing market is due to a broken housing supply and so on. So we do need to build more houses, but we need to think about, as a country, how they're built. If we think of the 50s and the 60s, which is what people are alluding back to, that was the era of creating new towns and new cities, to have properly self-contained communities built with all the infrastructure they need. And I would suggest that that's probably the better way forward if the government goes ahead with these things, to actually look at a series of new towns being built, not just in the southeast, but around the country, so that on a dispersed approach you can house people in sensible communities and provide the homes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Willis. Councillor Brown, do you wish to ask a supplementary question relating to your original question? Thank you.
Yes, please. Will you do everything possible to minimise further impact on existing residents, given the already high level of planned development in the plan?
I think I can honestly answer this on behalf of all of us. Yes, of course. Minimising impact will be first and foremost in every councillor's mind when we enter the review period.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any of the group leaders want to respond? No. Thank you. John Perry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you allow me just to indulge slightly to come back to Councillor Harper's point? Because very unusually, I support everything he said, which is quite unusual from this side. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll note that one. Thank you. I received notification from Councillor Peter Cooling, Chairman of Teeston Parish Council, wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability Transport Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you commit to ensuring that the number of planned new homes is kept within the capacity of our borough's infrastructure?
Councillor Burton, thank you.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The very, very simple answer would be yes, but I think there's a more detailed explanation that needs to lie behind that. Our rule book the National Planning Policy Framework sets out that local plans should plan positively for the development and infrastructure required to meet identified needs. In developing a strategy to meet the identified needs for housing, local planning authorities should work with other authorities and infrastructure providers to assess the quality and capacity of infrastructure in the area, and local plans should include strategic policies to ensure the delivery of necessary supporting infrastructure. Through the development of the Integrated Transport Strategy and Infrastructure Delivery Plan, this Council has evidenced the need to provide a series of measures to ensure that planned growth can be accommodated in infrastructure terms. This includes the provision of new schools and community infrastructure, highways and sustainable transport improvements, health infrastructure improvements and green infrastructure provision, including new open spaces. These measures are reflected in the strategic policies in the local plan so as to provide a robust basis on which to secure developer provision or financial contribution towards the delivery of these things through Section 106 agreements or using the new SIL regime. In general terms, the purpose of the measures is to provide the additional infrastructure capacity required to support growth, and their suitability, effectiveness and deliverability has been considered as part of the local plan's statutory independent examination process. The local plan inspector has found that the plan, as modified, complies with national policy and is sound. The Council will therefore continue to work constructively with other authorities and infrastructure providers to ensure that the necessary infrastructure measures are delivered in a timely manner to support planned development.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Do any other group leaders wish to respond? Thank you.
Just very briefly, as an addition to what Councillor Burton said, I think you can have some surety that the Kent leaders and the Kent County Council leader are all working very hard on this. Kent County Council is currently refreshing its plan of the infrastructure that's needed county-wide. Obviously, we have full input to that. And in particular, in relation to the consultation that's just come out from the Secretary of State about the number of homes that need to be provided, all the Kent leaders are making a very robust response to that, because clearly it's not just Maidstone. Kent as a whole is now in a very difficult place with infrastructure and the development within it. So just to make it very clear to everybody that while clearly we're most interested in Maidstone, it is also a county-wide issue, and there's more robustness when we lobby if we do it together, and that's what we're attempting to do at the moment. We'll still be making our own responses, but clearly as a unit we're also really responding now, saying the situation we are in the South East.
Thank you, Leader. Are there any other group leaders? No? Councillor Cooling, do you wish to ask a supplementary question relating to your original question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Given your assurance and given the state of traffic congestion, volume of rat running through our villages and air quality, what has gone wrong in the past and why will it be better in the future? Thank you.
Now that is a good supplementary. I think one of the big problems with this plan-making process has been that at the very beginning we fought the numbers, the inevitability of the numbers, and so much time, energy and effort was spent in a negative part of the process when we should have actually been coming closest together to actually plan the proper infrastructure at the earliest stage. So if there's a lesson that I would like to take forward into the future, is that we actually take a very calm approach to the evidence at the beginning. I'm sure we won't like matters in front of us, but let's actually get on with the positive, productive, constructive planning from day one.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other group leaders want to respond? Thank you. We've received a question from Councillor Roger Vidler, Vice Chairman of Bearston Turnham Society, but I understand he's not here this evening. What I'll do in this case is that we will supply a written response to his question. Thank you. I've received notification that Councillor John Horn of Turnham Parish Council wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Planning Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Chairman, how will you ensure that residents' concerns about air quality feed through to the workings and decisions of your committee?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horn. It's always a pleasure to see you in this chamber. The answer to this question falls in three parts, essentially. Firstly, the Planning Committee and members of all parties have been attempting to take the serious issue of air quality into account in determining planning applications already. However, it has to be noted that the policy template that we are using, based upon our previous local plan and the policies from it, has become rather outdated. So we have been perforce limited in what we can achieve. We have been updating the policy palette both because of our own initiative and because the inspector in the review of the examination of the local plan made it very clear that we needed to do so, to bring in a whole raft of new policy approaches. Firstly, we are bringing in policies within, assuming that we adopt the local plan, and let's not make that assumption yet because there's a debate on it this evening, policies within the local plan. We have already, at another committee within the Council, chaired by Councillor Burton, agreed that we will move, if again, as I say, the local plan is adopted, towards bringing in an air quality development plan document, which will enable us to actually get to grips with the planning aspects of dealing with the air quality control agenda. In the meantime, we have agreed to adopt the technical paper that the Kent Environmental Health managers and the planning managers have been looking at and have begun to adopt in other authorities across Kent, which will enable us to have some firmer grip on planning applications in the interim before we are able to prepare a full development plan document. Elsewhere in the Council, and this is the third part of the tripod, if you like, we have been working cross-party within the low emissions working group to bring forward a number of planning and non-planning control policies which will have an impact in improving the air quality within Maidstone, not just within the town, but hopefully across the borough as a whole. And we will be seeing the published results of the consultation, which has received a very strong response from the public, in a few days' time. So I would say to you, Councillor Horn and others, watch these spaces, because I hope that in the next year or so we will be getting a very firm grip on these issues, because frankly we have to, because we owe it to the public of this town, indeed this borough I should say, to actually do something about this hidden killer. Thanks for the question, and I await the supplementary with interest.
Thank you, Councillor. Any group leaders want to respond? John?
Just to add, I think there's been a lot of talk on air quality, but up to now, very little action, actually. We, on our side of the House, spent a lot of time on the streets in Maidstone, not just campaigning, but making people aware of this issue. And we put a lot of effort into it. And I'd just like that to be recognised, because I'm hearing a lot about air quality, but as I said, not a lot of action up to now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Horn, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
The Kent and Medway Air Quality Planning Guidance will soon be reported to the Strategic Planning Committee, and to reassure residents, once that amended to Maidstone specification, will your committee immediately apply that guidance, whether or not the development site is in the local plan?
Councillor English.
Yes, of course, Mr. Horn. The very purpose of bringing this forward, as everyone who's been associated with whether an officer or member knows, is to enable us to apply some form of control as quickly as possible in the interim period when we are developing our own document. I'll just say I think it's unfair to all the officers and the councillors across party who have been working very hard on this strategy and these approaches in general for the last year or so to say that there has been nothing happening. It is perhaps true to say that a lot of this activity has been below the surface or in committee rooms, fortunately not smoke-filled, but nevertheless committee rooms. But there has actually been a lot happening. And Councillors Burton and Burton, for example, on that side, have contributed very significantly to that work, as have I and Councillor Mortimer and Councillor Robertson on this side. So it's a real cross-party effort, and I think a lot of work's going in. But to come back to your original point, yes, it is absolutely essential that we do what we can with the guidance that is available to adopt as soon as possible. And obviously, there is still a committee vote to be taken, but I would be very, very surprised if we did not go forward with that, with the work that's been put in. And I really want to see it applied as widely and as deeply as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Any response from group leaders? Thank you. I've received notification that Mr. Arthur Thomas wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Are the council allowed to charge for external services that they could provide in-house and already see funding for from central government? How do you ensure that there is no conflict of interest?
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can assure you that Maidstone Borough Council will only charge for services that we are permitted to make a charge for. Where the council has a statutory duty to provide a service, a charge is only levied where there is a specific power for the council to do so. And I think from your question that that's really where you're targeting your question. Although I will say that the majority of charges we levy are usually for the non-discretionary, so that has to be very clear. The position is the same whether it's in-house or whether we've outsourced it to a contractor to provide the service for us. There's a lot of legislation covering this, and I will read so I get it exactly right. Perhaps the bit that's most interesting is the 2011 Localism Act, which would introduce the general power of competence, which explicitly gives councils the power to do anything that an individual can do which is not expressly prohibited by other legislation. And this includes the power to charge for services unless expressly prohibited to do so. On the second part of your question regarding conflicts of interest, each committee that has charges within its remit looks at it once a year, so it's looked at that way. But both councillors and officers have to work to the codes of conduct we each have a separate code of conduct, and that you can read for yourself in our constitution if you wish to do so. It makes it very, very clear what's permissible and what isn't.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any group leader wish to respond? Mr. Thomas, would you like to ask a supplementary question relating to your original question?
I would.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Why is your process server no longer paid directly by Maidstone Borough Council but via your externally paid solicitors firm when council employees could carry out this function cheaper? Is this so that they can unlawfully claim to serve council documents that are then used by the county court for bankrupting your customers as witnessed by council and others? Can you also tell me why the council's Director of Regeneration and Plays, who is a member of the council's corporate management team, uses Myers Clark Limited for his private company accounts? A firm of accountants who was
Thomas,
put forward...
that doesn't relate to your original question.
Pardon?
That doesn't relate to your original question.
Okay, no probs.
Thank you.
Obviously too difficult to answer.
Thank you very much. Can you just respect the chamber, please? I received notification that Mr Gary Butler wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee.
Can I just say, actually, this is quite impromptu. First time here.
No.
Oh, sorry,
No.
so it's not a public forum.
No, it is not a public forum. If you want to ask a question, you do it in the correct manner and you apply at least one day before the meeting. Malcolm Greer on the...
Sorry?
Malcolm Greer.
I've never heard of you, but thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, councillors.
Thank you very much. I've received notification that Mr Ben Frankham wishes to ask a...
So I'm on. No one wants to talk to me. Oh.
Apologise.
Yes, hello.
Thank you.
Right. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Do the council have a policy on the following agenda of UN Agenda 21, which basically destroys our Indigenous culture in favour of their own agenda, such as funds being made available to the Mela Festival, but no longer to the River Festival or the Green Fair?
Councillor Bishop.
Turn it off.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Butler, for your question. I shall respond thus. Local Agenda 21 was a commitment to local sustainable development, which including making improvements to economic, social and environmental conditions at a local level. That being the case, I struggle to see what connection is between Agenda 21 and the festivals and events in the borough.
Thank you, Councillor. Any group leaders? Thank you. Councillor Harper. Thank you.
I think it's important that the Council puts on record that it fully supports the development of a multicultural society and also a multicultural Maidstone. I think it's something which enriches our community here. An event such as the Mela offer a unique opportunity for residents of Maidstone where you can go and partake in other cultures in the borough. And in this borough we're particularly enriched by having large Goan and Nepalese communities, as well obviously as our colleagues who've moved in over the last 20 years, 30 years from Europe. And I think that's only enriched our community in the borough, and I think we should celebrate them. However, we should, and I mean our side, has wanted to encourage other festivals and events, such as the River Festival, but the Mellor is something which this council should do all it can do to promote and to support in terms of cultural cohesion in the borough.
Thank you. Mr. Butler, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I want to know why the council obtains county court bankruptcy orders for non-payment of council tax under EU insolvency regulations when they
sorry,
should
this doesn't relate to the original question, does it?
Could I answer it? Because I think it goes to the first one of following on the multicultural, which the gentleman has just promoted. So could I just finish?
Carry on then.
Thank you. I want to know why the council obtains county court bankruptcy orders with non-payment of council tax under EU insolvency regulations when they should be marked as non-EU proceedings, because the EU insolvency regulations do not apply to the council bankruptcy cases being brought against your customers. If there is
sorry,
no
this doesn't relate
cross-border...
to your original question. Thank you very much.
It's the same sort. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can you please sit down? Can you please sit down? Thank you.
I will do when I finish, thank you. But what I'm saying is this is not true democracy, okay, in my eyes. I'm an independent observer, and I don't... It may be protocol, but it doesn't sit well with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll forget your name, sorry.
I received notification that Mr Ben Frankham wished to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Who owes the council tax debt and which officer is ultimately responsible for its collection and payment?
Councillor Wilson.
Right, thank you. If a council debt is outstanding, it's the person or company named on the council tax bill that's liable. So that's very straightforward. And the responsibility for the administration and recovery of council tax is delegated within the council's constitution to the head of Revenues and Benefits Shared Service.
Thank you. Does any group members wish to respond? No. Mr Frankham, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
I may indeed.
Thank you.
Who are the beneficiaries of the land you are taxing us on, or are we the real beneficiaries who should be receiving a rebate? Have the people of Maidstone been made surety to pay the government and council's debt? And with what are we supposed to pay when there is no lawful money in circulation since the 1931 Gold Standard Act, apart from promises to pay, or is our promise also to pay, sorry, you heard your say, or also is our promise to pay also good enough? And I'd just like to finish this off finally. Please raise your hand, any councillor, including directors, officers present, who belong or have belonged to a secret society, confirm your allegiance to the people who have voted you in and pay your wages, or are you to serve a free Masonic lodge?
Thank you very much. That doesn't relate to your original question. Thank you very much.
I think you'll find it does, sir. I think everything that I've said there has relevance. I think it has a lot of relevance, a big significance, if you actually look into it.
It's irrelevant. Thank you.
What, the American militia movement? I think you are. I think you're all part of.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you go and please sit down? Thank you.
There is no integrity in this room. No, that's it. No integrity. Who was that? Show your face, please. All right, fantastic. Come over, man. Brilliant. So and all.
Could you please leave the chamber quickly? Thank you.
He's coming back now.
Sorry, I think I left something. It's my phone, man.
Right. Thank you. Can you leave the chamber, please? So we can get on with the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you. Can members please respect the chamber? Thank you very much. I've received notification that Mr. Robert Sinclair wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is very simply, can you ensure that the consideration of the new application for Woodcut Farm is deferred until the result of the planning inquiry is known?
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Sinclair, the very simple answer to this question is no. We have a statutory duty to determine planning applications within statutory timeframes unless an extension of time is agreed with the applicant. And obviously we have no control over whether such an agreement can be made. If the Council does not determine a planning application within the statutory timescales without an agreement to extension of time, we would be at risk of the application being appealed on the grounds of non-determination.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Any group leaders wish to respond? Thank you. Mr. Sinclair, do you wish to... Sorry. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I just wanted to support Councillor Burton. I mean, if things get called in, it's quite likely that an inspector, if they were minded to approve it, would end up recommending it with no, what do you call it? Conditions attached to it. Whereas if it goes through the planning committee, we can attach conditions. So it's generally a lot better to take it under planning than to not determine it and having it called in.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Sinclair, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes. Frankly, does this not conflict with the borough's public stance to strongly defend the member's decision against the current appeal, or don't you intend to do so now? I mean, the officers stood up and said they were going to defend the appeal, and the council said they got the money to do it, so they should be doing that. Or is this part of a deal whereby get the applicant to get his application through, and then they withdraw the appeal. I mean, it's crazy.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the policy of this council to defend the decisions made by planning committee at appeals, and I believe that work is in hand, and we will be defending the decisions made. However, should there be another decision, it's not necessary that the same reasons for refusal may occur, so it has to be treated as a separate and different application. But yes, this council does defend the decisions made by planning committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Any group leaders wish to respond? No? Thank you very much. Well, that concludes questions from public. That's questions from council members. Agenda item 11. I received notification that Councillor Harper wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability Transportation Committee. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I decided not to put any motions in tonight to make the meeting easier. So I thought I'd do a couple of questions instead. So, as Maidstone Council has adopted the Integrated Transport Plan a considerable time ago, what measures is the Borough Council doing to get it adopted or endorsed by Kent County Council? The Kent Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport recently stated that he saw no obstacle to adopting the walking and cycling strategy of the Integrated Transport Plan separately. Will the Council do all it can to ensure that that is carried out?
Councillor Burton.
Thank you again. We're already working very collaboratively at this time with County Council to deliver the schemes identified in the Integrated Transport Strategy and the Walking and Cycling Strategy. It's my understanding that County actually endorse and don't formally adopt these policies because they consider them to be local policies. Your comments, or the comments from the county member with regard to his willingness to endorse it are very much welcomed, and I believe it currently sits with him to do so, but we can certainly send him a letter and jog his memory.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harper, do you have a supplementary? No. Thank you. I received notification that Councillor Harper wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resources Committee. Councillor Wilson.
Can the Chair of Policy, or the Chairman of Policy and Resources Committee please update the Council on measures to protect the Hart Street properties? There's approximately 650 flats there from suffering flooding in the future. In the last major floods in Maidstone, there was serious flooding to the undercrofts and the access staircases to a considerable number of those properties, and the local plan identifies this as an area where further development is likely to take place, only potentially making the situation worse.
Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Councillor Harper, as you know, we've got a lot of flooding issues throughout the borough, and they're being dealt with as robustly as this council can manage to do it in connection with the Environment Agency and Kent County Council. What I will say is that the area you're talking about is slightly different to some of the other areas in that the land these properties have been built on were formerly industrial sites, and the flooding issues of that area were very well known. And I just wanted to check this. And when we had the 307 flats at Wallace Place in May 2004, the Environment Agency did respond, and the response was the agency considers the site is likely to be flood zone 3, category A, and that is high risk. So the Environment Agency and the borough were well aware of where we were proposing to build something. And that's why the development is as it is with the Undercroft. In other words, it's been built to withstand flooding so that it doesn't actually affect the living quarters of the people who are there. Now, I'm not trying to diminish the way people feel about a serious flood. And I think the issue here, particularly if we are going to, if indeed we do build more in the same area, is that it is not a reason in itself because an area floods, much as a lot of us disagree with this, but it's not a reason in itself not to build if mitigation measures can be found, which indeed in this area the developments did cover that. But there is an issue, I believe, in actually if the evacuation is required, that we have really robust plans in place to get people out. And that's where we work with the Kent Resilience Forum. And interestingly, I found out only today that the Coast Guards are part of that, because actually they have particular expertise in that sort of evacuation. The other thing, of course, is that that doesn't mean to say we won't look to see if there are other measures that can be taken, but we are taking the most serious first, which brings us back to the Yalding-Marden area. But as you know, Councillor Harper, as a High Street Ward councillor myself, neighbouring you, but on the other side of the river, we did actually work very hard to actually say, although we absolutely understand what's happened in Marden and Yalding, there is a flooding issue through coming downstream as well, and that also has to be tackled, and tackled very seriously. So I take your question with the utmost seriousness, but it is slightly different in that the buildings were designed for flood conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Harper, do you have a...
I do, yes. Whilst the buildings might originally had some resilience built in, so that the residential accommodation was elevated, the access to it is through ground level. It's through a series of staircases at ground level, and it was those staircases which got flooded, as well as obviously everyone's vehicle, which was all the vehicles were written off as well because of the flooding. So whilst I accept it's, you know, the actual flats as such weren't flooded, so people's homes weren't ruined, it did create massive problems for the residents down there during that relevant Christmas season. And if the Environment Agency back in 2004 recognised there being an issue, it's very unfortunate that all this information which has come to Policy Resources to date, they haven't referenced it once, and this affects a lot of people. Anyway.
Councillor Wilson.
Well, you'll forgive me for saying so, Councillor Harper, but I think that's the point I picked up on, that it was the access and egress from the buildings that are a problem, and we need to be sure that we can adequately cover that in the event of flooding. Where I agree with you is that I actually do believe it was a pity that the whole issue of flooding throughout the borough wasn't picked up after those major floods immediately, and it's had to be local ward councillors everywhere who have actually said, yes, but what about us? And indeed, in the case of Marden and Yalding, saying, well, you know about us, but what are you doing about it and how long are you taking? So the only robust answer I can give you is that as leader of the council and as chairman of Policy and Resources, I'm doing all I can to try and expedite getting some resolutions to all of this. Now, things are moving in Marden and Yalding, perhaps not as quickly as we'd like, but at least the work's been done to look at the individual properties and test whether they can have individual protection or not. But it's quite a small number overall, so it needs to go on to the second stage, which says, well, can we have a collective round a number of properties? We have looked at the town centre in relation to the High Street Ward side, because when we get flooding, it's actually that side that affects commercial properties first, before it affects any residences in the town centre. So things are moving forward. I take it personally very, very seriously indeed. I've never forgotten when I was at one of my very first meetings as a councillor, I sat next to Councillor Harper, who is, as we all know, an emergency officer, and there was an application for a house in the floodplain, and he said, I'm not voting for this because you could actually drown in 6 inches of water. I've never forgotten it. It means, I think, it means that you have to take flooding, no matter how small or how great, with the utmost seriousness, and this council does exactly that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm now going to move forward to agenda item 17. I call upon Councillor David Burton to move the recommendations of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee regarding the adoption of the Maidstone Borough Local Plan 2017 recommendations on page 141. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, I think the matter is well set out before us in the papers this evening. We have consideration of the local plan in the appendix which you've all received, and I draw to your attention the very minor factual corrections which are also set out in the note that you have in front of you. This is the moment, I think, where we all take just one step back from ourselves. Whatever we may have thought about on this matter in the past, we need to hear everything one last time and make the decision. So without further words at this stage, I move the motion that, subject to the minor factual corrections set out in the note on this item, circulated separately at the meeting, the Maidstone Borough Local Plan 2017 in appendix, which incorporates the inspector's main modifications and the policy maps also in the appendix, be adopted. And this is the recommendation that comes to you from the Strategic Planning Committee that met to consider the matter.
Councillor Burton. Councillor Wilson.
I was going to second it, but I believe Councillor Matt Borton got in first, so I would prefer to speak a little bit later. Thank you very much.
You're seconding it? Okay.
Is he going to speak or reserve his right?
Sorry?
Reserve your right?
You do? Right. Nobody else? Is the recommendation agreed? Anybody against it? Right.
Shall we take a vote?
Well, let's check. Let's check that people don't want to debate. Can you just ask whether people want to debate?
Do you want to debate it?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mr. Mayor, we've moved on to the vote. The only question now is to whether they actually want a formal vote or whether we can agree it and then con.
You need a formal vote. Yes? Okay. All right. Selina.
Mr. Mayor, yes, I would request a formal vote on this, please, and a named vote as well. Thank you.
Okay. We've got 5 people.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Formal vote. Thank you.
Don't forget to vote yourself.
Yeah.
So just for procedural reasons, yeah, even though they've moved to the vote, Matt Borton had reserved his right to speak. You just need to check that he doesn't want to say anything.
Okay. Right. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. Matt Borton, do you want to speak?
I will speak, as I seconded the motion, Councillor
He reserved
English.
his right.
So at this point, I'll speak. And Nearly 2 years ago, this council decided that it would put the plan as it was then to the inspector. And I spoke that night about the advantages it would bring to the borough, particularly the young and the future generations who would benefit from it. And I'm pleased that we're back here tonight with with an option to adopt the plan and a chance to make it happen. I think we should put tonight's vote in context. My understanding is that it was first discussed, this local plan, by the council in 2005. That's 12 years ago. I'm 24 years old, so this council has spent half of my lifetime discussing this plan. So the idea that we've had no chance, there's been no consultation about this, is, I'm afraid, absolute nonsense. And it's time to make the most of this opportunity and provide certainty to taxpayers in the borough. Every single one of us, including me, can find much in the document which we object to. I'd have liked to see Hermitage Lane protected. I'd have liked to see Junction 8 properly defended. And I'd like to see far better infrastructure for motorists. But the time for these debates is over. The government inspector has found our plan to be sound, and whether we like it or not, the argument about specific sites has been won and lost years ago. If we don't stop this plan now, we all know what the future consequences will be. Not just for housing numbers, but for the ability to prevent future developments on unsuitable sites in the countryside. We need the certainty to prevent this and protect our villages and the urban edge. But this plan provides us with the opportunities which we must take too. Over the first years of this plan, the Conservatives were leading this council and led from the front. The Liberal Democrats' U-turn, when they took over the council in 2015, was welcome, if somewhat disingenuous. It can therefore only be disappointing to local residents when members from the party opposite unanimously vote against cascade clauses to provide necessary infrastructure, primarily the Leeds-Langley Relief Road, clearly identified in the local plan as part of the Section 106 agreement on our largest housing allocation. That, in my opinion, puts the success of this local plan at risk, and I believe is deeply irresponsible for elected members to take. Last year, I said this plan was about the future generations, and for people like me who still can't get on the housing ladder in our mid-20s. 12 months on, this remains the case. So I'd urge all members to adopt this plan tonight and allow us to plan for the future. I'd rather not spend another half of my life discussing this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We'll now go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, members. When I read your name, can you tell me whether you are voting for, against or abstaining? No, I can probably hear you. And I don't want to have to keep switching mine on and off. So, starting with Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Barnard. Councillor Blackmore. Councillor Borton. Councillor Bryce. Councillor David Burton. And Councillor Matthew Burton. Councillor Butler. Councillor Clark. Councillor Cox. Councillor Cumming. Councillor Daly. Councillor Ells. Councillor English. Councillor Fermor. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fort. Councillor Gooch. Councillor Greer.
4.
Councillor Grigg. Councillor Harper. Councillor Harvey. That was 4. And Councillor Hasty. Councillor Hinder. Councillor Joy. Councillor Lewins. Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Brian Mortimer. Councillor Derek Mortimer. Councillor Munford? For. Councillor Nagy?
For.
Councillor Newton?
Against.
Councillor Perry?
Against.
Councillor Pickett?
For.
Councillor Powell?
Against.
Councillor Prendergast?
Against.
Councillor Ring?
For.
Councillor Robertson?
For.
Councillor Round?
For.
Councillor Mrs Sams?
For.
Councillor Sams?
For.
Councillor Spooner?
Against.
Councillor Stockel? Councillor Vizard?
For.
Councillor Webb?
For.
Councillor Webster? Councillor de Wigendine?
Against.
Councillor Wilby?
For.
Councillor Willis? And Councillor Mrs Wilson? Thank you. I think you can probably see the outcome, but we'll add the numbers up and I'll tell them to you in a moment. Yeah. Should be yeah. Okay. Sorry, say it again. 40. 40. So that's 40 people voting for, 9 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
I think we should clap.
Thank you, members. Well done. May I just add to that I think we need a big thank you to our officers for all the work they've done, but likewise to members as well for all the hours they've put in on committees, etc. It's been a bit of a long haul. We're there now. Thank you so much. It starts again soon. Thank you. Cheers. Right.
Item 16. Item 16.
16 is where I'm going. Yeah. Item 16, members. I called upon Councillor David Burton to move the recommendations of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability, Transportation Committee regarding the approval of SIL's charging schedule. Recommendations on page 63. David Burton, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, the matter is set out in the papers quite clearly. This relates to our decision to introduce the SIL charging levy. Strategic Planning Committee considered the matter on the 12th of September and resolved to recommend to full council that we adopt this, the SIL charging schedule. I will draw to members' attention that there is a change in the date for implementation from that which was originally put in front of strategic planning. This recognises the pause that we've had in considering the local plan whilst the Secretary of State considered the matter. So I move, therefore, that Maidstone Borough Community Infrastructure Levy charging schedule be approved in accordance with Section 213 of the Planning Act with an effective implementation date of the 1st of October 2018 and that the SIL Regulation 123 list, Appendix B, and SIL Instalments Policy, Appendix C, be approved.
Councillor Cox.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that, please. Sorry. I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
No, I mean, I do think, I won't extensively speak, yes then. The work that's been done by officers has shown us that there is an amount of work that needs to be done and some clarity that needs to be brought to this. So I do think that the extension to the 1st of October is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Right, I've got to go back to... Will you be there in a minute? Right, go back to... Item number 12. There is no report from the Leader of the Council.
Mr Mayor, just to explain, in view of the gravity of the issues we had tonight, in agreement with the other leaders and the group spokesperson for the independents, it was agreed that I would not give an update speech tonight. That if anything changed that was important, I would bring it to all of you, and everything else tends to be appearing on committee papers in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Agenda item 13. I called upon Councillor Burton to move the recommendations of the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board regarding amendments to the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board Agreements recommendations on page 7. David Burton, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, I'd like to bring this matter to the Council. This is the approval of the amended collaboration agreement with Kent County Council, parish councils and ourselves for regulating the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board. I would therefore move that the amended Maidstone Joint Transportation Board agreement at Appendix 2 is adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor English.
Yes, I'd like to second this, Mr Mayor. Although this issue has not been dragging on quite as long as the half a lifetime of the local plan, it has, however, been an issue that has been rumbling on for a very, very long time between the Borough, the Kent Association of Local Councils and KCC, and it's immensely pleasing this evening to see this issue finally resolved, and I hope you all vote in favour of it.
Thank you. Is the recommendation agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 14. I called upon Councillor Mrs Wilson to move the recommendations of the Policy Resources Committee regarding amendments to the Constitution arising from the adoption of a new policy on disposal of property recommendations on page 13. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'd merely like to move the recommendations that you will find on page 23 regarding the policy on disposal of property, its amendments to the Constitution. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I'd just like to second it.
Do you wish to speak? No. Thank you. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 15. I called upon Councillor Mrs Wilson to move the recommendations of the Policy Resources Committee regarding the medium-term financial strategy recommendations on page 25.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that we agree that the medium-term financial strategy is agreed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I'd like to, as Vice Chair, second this, and whilst tempted to speak, I will restrain myself.
Councillor Harper, that is much appreciated. Thank you. Is the recommendation agreed? Thank you, members. 16 we've done, 17 we've done, 18. There are no reports from the Communities Housing and Environment Committee on this occasion. Item 19, I called upon the Chief Executive to present the report relating to the appointment of Monitoring Officer recommendations on page 585. Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, I'm grateful, and following in the pattern of this evening, I'll keep my comments brief. We need a monitoring officer. This is a proposal to appoint Patricia Noble as that person.
Councillor Wilson.
I'd just like to say that I don't think very many councillors have had the opportunity to actually meet or see Patricia Noble up till now, and I'd like to formally welcome her to the council on behalf of all of us.
Oh, Ripple.
Thank you.
You need a seconder? You need a seconder.
I need a seconder. Faye Gooch, thank you very much.
I put my hand up first, Chairman, and I would very much like to welcome... Oh, I mustn't talk, but welcome. Nice to have you on board, Patricia.
Thank you, Faye. I do apologise. Is that all agreed? Thank you. Right. Agenda item 20. I move that the wishes of the leader of the Conservative Group and the leader of the UKIP Group with regard to the membership of committees as set out in the agenda be accepted.
Ooh! Is that on the switch?
It is something I said. I need a seconder. Dan Daly? Councillor Dan Daly. Is that agreed? Right, I've got a... How do I put this thing on?
I have no idea.
Who's got their camera? Where's the camera?
I normally only wear this on Friday evenings, but when I was opening the over at the museum, the new gallery we got over there, which if you haven't seen it, you really do need to go. It was money well spent. It's fantastic. It really is. And there's a certain councillor over there. I think she might be the leader. Not quite sure. But what she did say was that if I would wear this at full council, she would put £50, and I've upped that. It's 55, as you know, young lady. And I hope you've got the money there. That money will go to the museum fund. If anybody else has got any 50-pounders. Oh, by God.
Who are you? Who are you, Mr. Mayor?
I'm an Egyptian young lady.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want everybody here to get the idea that I'm a gambler, but I thought this was in a good cause.
What's coming at the next meeting? You just wait. Councillor Wilson, have you got something to say? Councillor Wilson? You've got the money? My God. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll pass this on to the Chief Executive, who will undoubtedly put it in the appropriate bin. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for bearing with us. Sorry it was a bit noisy at times. We've got there in the end. I think we've got a... John really wants to say something there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can never be outgunned by the Liberal Democrats. I don't have any. I don't have any sterling in my wallet, but I have a superior currency called the euro.
I missed that.
So if you accept €60, then that would be fine.
We will take anything. So it doesn't matter if it's Matchbox tops, you name it, we'll take them. So if anybody's got any euros, any other cash, we'll take it. I'm not saying we're desperate. We're just really desperate. Thank you so much. Have a good journey home and a safe journey, and thank you very much for your time this evening.